Hello there. So, just recently, here at the end of October, Books has now announced their fall lineup. And in that announcement, they had three devices that they unveiled. That's the Note Air 4C, that's the Books Note Max, I believe, and then the second iteration of the Palma. Now, based on my limited budget and my own personal interests, I only wanted to focus on one of these devices. So let's kind of start talking a little bit about the two devices that I won't be reviewing. The first is the Books Palma, and this is the second iteration of it. And I know there's a lot of interest in the Palma, and people really like that form factor, but that's just not something I'm personally interested in. I find that e-readers generally are fairly ubiquitous, and I think the Books Palma is predominantly an e-reader. Of course, it can do other apps as well, so I don't mean to be reductionist in explaining it like that, but that's what I see as the primary function, and I'm just not particularly interested in it, although I know a lot of people are. I think honestly, for the most part, people interested in that device are just interested in things like the battery and a couple other aspects of it, which will probably be pretty well reviewed by other folks. And so to me, it's like you either know you want one or you don't, and you just want to check in. And I think there'll be reviews out there to help folks with that. So I passed on that. Then there's the Note Max. And this is a really intriguing device. There's a lot of interesting things here. And the best way to think about it is a Books Go 10.3, but stretched out to a 13-inch size, and it includes their refresh technology, which is a GPU, and software, which helps to kind of eliminate ghosting. So it's definitely intriguing, particularly because of the price point. We've never seen a 13-inch model at $650. I believe it's going to be extra for the keyboard. It usually is, but haven't got that confirmed yet. So there's a lot to like about it. However, to me, we pretty much kind of know what that device is. The lingering question, I guess, like the Palma, is around, well, what's the battery life actually going to be like? But again, there'll be plenty of reviews out there on that, and it's one of those things that I think you either know or you want, or you don't know you want. Or you don't want it, and you'll just need a couple of reviews just to validate that battery life, if it's a liability or not, and maybe one or two other aspects, and you're good to go. So to me, there's not a lot of intrigue ultimately in either the Palma 2 or the Books Max because of the devices that kind of preceded it. I guess you could make a similar argument for the Note Air 4C. I mean, it's a very much an iterative advancement over the 3C, but I still think that the more intriguing changes are here. Whether we're talking about, if they can improve on the Kaleido 3 screen and make that background lighter in any notable way, that's one thing I'll be looking for. Software changes, how are they going to handle, for example, strike-through erase? That's a feature that was introduced a year ago, and I've always felt was kind of half-baked, like it could be just a little bit better and would be amazing. So did they solve that? That's what I'm interested in. Or how have they improved, their reading application? That's one of my big criticisms going back, particularly to the Go, is how powerful the reading app is, which is good, but also how kind of convoluted the UI is. It looks like Books has done some changes on that UI. Definitely fascinated to look into that. And then finally, and I'm sure there's a lot of other features as well, but in the demonstration when they launched the device, they did show a headings feature. We know that Supernote has had a headings feature, which is very powerful for a long time. Will Books' heading feature be similar? How will it differ? A lot of intriguing answers. Now you might say, or intriguing things about the device, and you might say, well, the Note Max is going to have those changes as well, which is true, but the Note Max is not available now. The Note Air 4C is, and that's another big reason why I've decided to review that particular device. So this video is about the Note Air 4C and the unboxing. We'll do a setup, and we'll do some comparisons to the Note Air 3C as well, at least at the surface level, particularly around the hardware. Here's some specifications of what's changed between the Note Air 3C to the Note Air 4C, and I've highlighted in a shaded color where those differences really lie, as long as they were significant differences. So this is part of the reason why folks really have kind of identified this device as more of an iterative adjustment, because there's just so much that is similar between this device and the other device, including, of course, the same fundamental screen technology. But again, I think most of the intrigue about this particular device lies in the software side of things, and I'm not looking for huge changes on the hardware side. But if there are any, we'll definitely find out in this video. So having said that, let's go ahead and jump right in and unbox this thing. Okay, so here it is. I've gone ahead and taken off the plastic wrap. You've got this kind of nice box where it says Note Series and a little bit of a rainbow metallic effect here. It says books make a difference. And then on the back, you can see some of the specifications. They do a nice artistic touch by bringing the design language from the device itself onto the boxing. That's kind of cool. Just a little bit on the side. It says Book Super Refresh on one side and Note Air 4C on the other, which is off of camera view. Okay, so let's go ahead and open this thing. Slide out like so. Oh, you just get a big whiff of new electronics when you do that. Take the cover off. This inside cover has a little bit of very thin padding to protect the device. Here is the device itself. Let's take a quick look before we get into that, though, for the rest of the package content. So here we've got, looks like the stylus and the USB-C cable. So let's take a look at that. Oops. Yep, there we go. We've got a classic stylus. This is the one that's been coming with the Note Air series since the beginning. It doesn't have an eraser, but it does have nice grooves along the shaft, which are kind of easy to hold. And of course, there's the magnetic side and a little cap, which you can toss away. And then there is a removal tool. This is for expandable storage. And then, of course, you've got USB-C cable, USB-B to C for charging the device. All right, and then over here, just have the documentation, which we will file away as appropriate. All right, let's go ahead and remove all this. Let's go ahead and unwrap the device itself. Try not to smack it around too much in the process. Okay, I've taken the white balance down a little bit because I noticed in the camera, and even now, this strip is being a little bit muted in terms of its color. This is a little more of a vibrant, I'm not sure how I would quite phrase it. It's almost kind of a rubber band color, where on the screen it's coming across a little more yellow. But this is actually more pinkish than it appears in the video. I'm not quite sure why the camera's not picking that up. All right, so here's the back of the 4C in comparison to the back of the 3C. And it's a little skewed because the light's coming from the left side. But what you can tell up front is that this device is just a touch blacker in terms of the overall coloring. And the stripes are roughly the same color. The 3C is a little bit bolder, a little more fluorescent, if you will, on its coloring, and it's a little more muted on this one. And the camera's kind of making them both look fairly muted, so I'm not quite sure why that is. If I go ahead and just switch places here, then you can still see how this one's still darker. You can't tell because of the lighting, but it's definitely, as I'm looking at it, pretty clear, but very subtle, not significant at all. Okay, so flip them over. Again, the 4C is on the left, the 3C is on the right. And very similar design. Of course, the main difference is on the 3C, the books is here in a color that matches the stripe, and then the 4C, it's just black, so not particularly significant. In terms of the sides, both are identical in that the USB-C ports are here. You both have your expansion card trays here, and you've got speakers here and here. So exact same design language on the sides. You've got your fingerprint readers here, and then on the opposite side where your magnetic stylus would attach, there doesn't appear to be anything. So in summary, here are all the contents overall, and really very little deviation from the hardware and form factor that we're used to with the Note Air 3C. So all that carries forward. Why don't we go ahead and do a weigh-in, and we'll compare the differences if there are any. Actually, just before we do in the weigh-in, let's go ahead and take care of the cover as well. And what's interesting here is I thought it was the exact same cover as the Note Air 3C, and you can barely make it out. It says right here, Note Air 4C. So let's take a quick look at that and see if it actually differs from what we've seen before. Here's the language on the back of the box if you're interested in that. But let's go ahead and just rip this up. We won't be needing this again. Get this out of here. Get rid of the plastic wrap. And get rid of the insert and the desiccant. So here we go. So this is the inside of the cover, and indeed it is different from what we're used to. This is very much a green. And if we look at the inside of the previous one, it's this kind of basic gray, and the fabric isn't as obvious as it is. It's connected magnetically now here. So that's kind of interesting. And if we look at the outside, however, very similar indeed. The 4C here on the left, the 3C here on the right. So for the most part the same, just slightly different on the inside. And of course the form factor is identical between the two. Here's the inside of the flap. Again, where you can see that difference between the green and the gray of the previous version. But outside of that one aesthetic difference, these are the same covers. One thing I want to say before we go any further regarding this cover, and I've been using this Origami cover now for a year, and it's held up really well. This is one of the best covers that I've ever had. And let's actually go ahead and go to a quick cutaway and show you how the Origami works on this. Okay, so this is what the Origami cover looks like in action, and there's two modes I'm going to highlight. So this is using the Note Air 3C, but the Note Air 4C has the exact same cover, so it's the same demonstration. So we'll start off with what you might call the iPad type of style, where we go ahead and make a triangle in the back and stand it up like so. So there we are, and you can see from the side view how that works. Pretty straightforward, but here's my favorite version. So we're going to go ahead and lift this up, fold this in, and voila. Here you have the standing mode. We can take a look at the back there, and you can see how it creates this nice stand. Just gives you a sense of how that works all around. Love this part of the Origami cover. So when I record videos, instead of using a teleprompter, oftentimes I'll type my notes in Word, and then I will basically open the Word app here on this device and have it displaying in front of me, just below the camera as I'm doing my video. So this has been an essential tool because of this Origami cover for how I record my videos. In a similar fashion, if I'm doing a PowerPoint, oftentimes I have my PowerPoint notes here on this device as well. So the tablet aspect of this device coupled with the Origami cover has been awesome in my workflow. So the last thing I'll say, and this one is the original 3C cover, is that it has held up really well. It remains just as rigid as it was when I first purchased it. Doesn't really show a lot of signs of wear or tear. Just a really good design on this cover. I'm super glad they're carrying forward the exact same cover with the Note Air 4C. There was no reason to improve upon what was already probably one of the best covers out there. So no problem with that. Glad to see that continue. Let's go ahead and do the weigh-in. Okay, let's go ahead and do the weigh-in. We'll start with the 4C device itself. And Ooh, this is interesting. So 440 grams, they'd actually indicated 420. So this is 20 grams heavier than what they said. Let me go ahead and put the 3C on there. 3C was supposed to be 430. And this one comes in heavier as well at 448. So an 8-gram difference. There's a little bit of a margin of error of 1 of 2 grams on this particular scale. So the new 4C is indeed lighter, but it's than the 3C, but it's much heavier than indicated. Well, 20 grams off of 420. I wouldn't, maybe that's not much, but it's notable. I did not expect that. Okay, let's go ahead and add in the stylus and see what we get. So we've got 440, and stylus is coming in at about 12, so combined it's 452. And we'll go ahead and put on the case, and we're talking a total of 704 grams. Let's compare that then to the total package for the Note Air 3C. Go ahead and put the device there. Pop on the case, figuratively speaking, and that comes in at 720. So there's your weigh-in. So the overall takeaway here is the 4C is indeed lighter than the 3C, not nearly as much as they advertised, and not really in a significant way. You're not going to notice it, in my opinion. It's pretty nominal. So really no weight difference to note of between the two devices, even though technically the 4C is lighter. All right, that is covering our quick hardware review. Not a lot to say, again, because so much of the design language does carry forward from the 3C. So why don't we go ahead and power this up and go through that setup process. All right, going to ask us for our language. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. Hello. All right, we're not going to read any of these agreements. I'm here in California, so fine, we'll go with LA. I'm going to go ahead and turn off some of these auto sleep features. Oops. And then here it's asking what kind of navigation do you want. Do you want a navigation bar, which is similar to Android, and you've got a number of options there? Or do you want gestures? I prefer gestures. You can also, I believe, let's decide what you want the gestures to be. No, it's not going to let me select that here. It will let me to select that in the menu. So this is just basically defaulting to e-ink center here, to home screen in the middle, and to the multitask switcher on the left. Again, those can all be customized later. We can also turn on and off the side swipe gestures. We'll go over all this in the visual tour, so we'll skip that for now and leave those defaulted to off. And right into the device. Interesting, it hasn't even asked me for Wi-Fi yet. Maybe that's going to pop up in just a second here. One of the interesting differences for the first time, the Note series is going to take on what we have associated with the Tab series. So you get a few things different. First off, you get widgets. So we see here's a widget for your document library, and then for notes, apps, a little app tray down there. And if I swipe to the side, so I have more widgets here as well. And presumably these are customizable. We'll check that out in the visual tour. If we had additional apps, they would carry forward in pages on the right. Okay, so this is interesting. I don't think I've ever had a device, an e-ink device that is, where the setting up the Wi-Fi was not part of the normal setup process. I actually had to go into settings and connect to my Wi-Fi network because it didn't ask me for that during setup. Not really a big deal one way or the other, but kind of a surprise. I don't think I've ever seen that before. But now that I have connected it to Wi-Fi, it is asking me to update. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and I'll go ahead and time it, and we'll come back, and when we're done, I'll let you know how long it took. Okay, so the firmware downloaded and installed, and it took a little over 12 minutes in total, which is pretty quick. I've seen firmware updates from a new device go a lot longer than that, 20, 30, 40 minutes, even more. So it's pretty good. Now, just looking at the screen, there is an unusual lighting situation. I've been playing with my camera to try to get the coloring right. This is about as close as I can get. The screen is accurate for the most part, particularly the colors. The background of the screen, as I'm looking at it, is slightly darker than it appears on the camera. It's got a little bit more of an olive tint to it, where here on the camera it's looking a little bit more light gray. So there is a little bit of an artificial, kind of studio look to the screen, but it's not that far off. And again, the colors seem pretty accurate when I'm looking between the device and what the camera is showing. So pretty close to how it looks in real life, just a touch lighter on the screen. Let's just check to make sure we don't have any front lighting. Oh, we do have front lighting. Let's turn that off. Okay, there we go. Oh, and actually it looks a lot closer now. Still a touch darker in real life than it is on the screen. Nevertheless, this is for the most part what it looks like, just a couple shades off. We're going to go ahead and do a comparison then. So far we really haven't seen really much of significance from a hardware perspective from the Note Air 3C, but will we see a difference in the screen? Let's take a look at that. So I'm going to go ahead and slide in the Note Air 3C here. And we'll turn this on. Go into the notes, and actually let's go ahead and go into a note here as well. Just create a quick notebook. So in theory, the Note Air 4C was supposed to be lighter in background than the 3C, which is on the right. And let me just make sure. Yeah, we've got no front lighting there, and no front lighting here. And I have to tell you that you can't make it up very well on the screen, but I would argue that there is, again, a little more of an olive tint to the 4C than there is on the 3C, and I think the 3C is actually a touch lighter. Let's go ahead and reverse the position, because we do have a lot more lighting on this side, since that's where it's coming in from. Let's see how that differs as we switch places. Like so. No, pretty much, yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. The 4C actually is looking a little bit darker, and get rid of the ghosting there, than the 3C, which has a little bit of a paler complexion, and you can just barely make that out on camera, but looking at it live, you can definitely tell the difference in coloring. It's not so much, and again, that is the key. It's the coloring that's the key. It's not so much that the 4C is darker, although I think it is a touch darker. It's just got that slightly more olive tint to the screen, where this one's much more of a lighter gray. That's the difference that I can see. And then the gray itself makes it look a little bit lighter, in my opinion, regardless of whether it's on the left or the right. So, yeah, interesting. So we thought that the major difference in terms of hardware, other than the fact that the 4C can have a 2 terabyte memory card, was going to be that it was going to be a little bit lighter on the Kaleido screen in the background. It's definitely not lighter. It's certainly a slightly different coloring, and it may even be a touch darker. Let's go ahead and play around a little bit with front lighting and get a sense of what that's like. We'll start with full cold on both. Okay. I am getting a brighter, whiter cold here on the 4C. On the 3C, it's a little bit darker. So these are both on maximum cold lighting. Again, let's go ahead and swap these around just to make sure that the lighting of the studio isn't influencing what we're seeing. And no, you definitely see a nice wider version of front lighting with the 4C than the 3C. So that's interesting. That is one difference then. Let's go ahead and all warm lighting on both and see how that looks. Okay. The 4C again is coming across as the brighter of the front lights at maximum value, a little more muted, so you see a little bit more of a little more orange tint, if you will, on the 4C, and the 3C is a little more of a peach tint. And that's definitely coming across on the camera. Let me again, sorry for the vertigo, but let me go ahead and switch this around just again to make sure that what we're seeing is not a factor of the lighting. And no, definitely not. You can see it's still brighter over here on the 4C and still more muted here on the 3C. So I think that concludes our hardware comparison of the 3C and the 4C. One last comment as it relates to the 4C screen. I went ahead and just kind of took it outside of this environment toward kind of a normal lighting, indoor lighting situation. And I'd mentioned how the screen, particularly compared to the 3C, has a little bit of an olive tint. But when you look at it by itself under normal indoor lighting, you don't really get that olive at all. It is really more of a gray. So that was kind of interesting. Let's go ahead and just do a couple more comparisons just for fun. And we'll start with the Viwoods. The Viwoods is a relatively new device that came up, and it has a Carta 1300 screen. So this is the same screen, for example, that we expect to see the Supernote come out with, although I don't know if it'll be as bright. We won't know because they'll put on the Feel-Right films that may have an impact. But this is pretty much what the Carta 1300 screen looks like without any film on it. And you can see it's significantly brighter than the Kaleido screen. That's not a surprise, of course, because the Kaleido screen has the color filter. That's why it has the darker background. And this is what it looks like without a Kaleido 3 screen. Let's go ahead and reverse these again just to take a look at what that looks like. And again, the 4C is closer to the light source, so you would expect it to be brighter, but there's a clear difference when you're using a black and white screen, a Carta 1300 screen, versus the Kaleido 3. Let's go ahead and turn on that cold front lighting all the way and see how those compare. Okay, so the brightness is pretty similar, although the coloring is different between the two. And it does look a little bit whiter when you have front lighting on, again, all cold front lighting, versus this, which now takes on a little bit of a yellowish hue, which wasn't as apparent before, but the contrast, I think, is what makes that stick out. Let's do one last comparison, just for fun. And this is going to be a comparison of the Viwoods versus the Go 10.3. And you can see here, the Viwoods is just a touch on the lighter side, not particularly perceptible, but just a hair. And if we reverse these, that should continue to be the case. Yeah, like so. So very similar screens, maybe just a touch lighter for the Carta 1300 Viwood screen. Okay, so the last check we'll do from a hardware perspective is just what the screen sounds like. And we'll start with the Note Air 3C as kind of a baseline. I've got the microphone over there, so let's go ahead and hear what it sounds like. Okay, and now let's go ahead and do the 4C and see what that sounds like. All right, so similar between the two. I think there's a little bit more of a, lack of a better term, bass sound to the scribbling on this, a little squeakier on the 3C, but that's with scribbling. As I actually write, very similar. I actually found writing to be slightly squeakier on this. So if I wrote in some words, that's what I found squeakier. But if you scribble like this, then it sounds bassier. Kind of curious, but not a huge difference between the sounds either way. Very similar between the two devices. I know I said I wasn't going over software aspects necessarily in this video, but I have to check out this Scribble to Erase and see if they've improved on it from when it was introduced a year ago. No, still leaving artifacts. Oh, that's a disappointment. Okay. Ah, dang. I was hoping that would be an improvement. Well, hopefully they'll work on that over this coming year. Alright, that's going to do it for this video. There's the unboxing. We now know what the device is like from a hardware perspective and a little bit to how that compares with the Note Air 3C. The next video, we're going to go into a visual tour, and this is an in-depth exploration of what the device can do. It's really not so much a review as it is a demonstration, just so it's clear what the device is capable of. So that's the purpose of the visual tour. And then we'll start moving into the review territory in the third video, which will go into battery life measurements, and we'll start talking about some other aspects of the device. And then finally, the fourth video will be my final review. And that's usually fairly detailed, with the pros and cons list, both primary and secondary and so on. One little intriguing wrinkle to this review series is that it's kind of staggered but simultaneous to this series will be my review of the Bigme B1051C. I think I've got that name right. And the reason why I mention that is that device is Bigme's answer to what Books has. Think of this as the Toyota Camry versus the Honda Accord, if you will, from these two companies. Although that's probably a little too generous towards Bigme. They do come in at a much higher price point, and Books generally has had the much better note-taking and reading apps, so there is definitely a differentiator between the two companies. Nevertheless, it will be interesting to see, what advancements that Bigme is making, particularly now that we know, or we'll find out soon, what advancements Books is making. So has that gap shrunk at all, or has it grown larger? And we'll find out as we do these review series somewhat in parallel. I have the Note Air 4C now. I don't have the Bigme device yet as of this video, but it should be coming within a week, so we'll see kind of a mixing of those two series. So that's something we'll be contrasting more in the Bigme series, I would suspect, since the Note series will be a little bit ahead. All right, with that, I can't wait to see you in the next video. Until then, I'll see you next time.